most serious conflicts in Europe since World War II. I will give you some general information about the war, its history, the parties involved, the location, the UN involvement, and the possible solutions. I hope you find this video informative and interesting. If you do, please like, share, and subscribe for more content like this.
The war in Ukraine began in February 2014 when Russia annexed the Crimean Peninsula, a part of Ukraine, in a move that was widely condemned by the international community as a violation of Ukraine's sovereignty and territorial integrity. Since then, Russia has also supported separatist rebels in the eastern regions of Donetsk and Luhansk, collectively known as Donbas, who have declared themselves independent from Kyiv. The war has claimed more than 14,000 lives, displaced more than 1.5 million people, and damaged the infrastructure and economy of both countries. The main issues at stake are the future of Ukraine's political and economic orientation, whether it will align more with the West or with Russia, and the security and stability of the region and the world.
Ukraine has a long and complex history, dating back to the medieval state of Kievan Rus, which was the ancestor of modern Ukraine, Belarus, and Russia. Over the centuries, Ukraine was divided and ruled by various powers, such as Poland, Lithuania, the Ottoman Empire, Austria-Hungary, and the Soviet Union. Ukraine declared its independence in 1991 after the collapse of the Soviet Union, but faced many challenges such as corruption, poverty, and political instability. In 2013, a popular uprising known as the Euromaidan erupted in Kiev, the capital, against the then-president Viktor Yanukovych, who had rejected a deal for closer integration with the European Union, and instead opted for closer ties with Russia. Yanukovych fled the country in February 2014. A new pro-Western government took power. Russia, however, saw this as a threat to its interests and influence in the region and responded by annexing Crimea and supporting the separatists in the Donbas.
The Ukrainian government, led by President Volodymyr Zelensky, is fighting to preserve the unity of sovereignty in the country and to pursue as inspirations to join the European Union and NATO. The Western military alliance, it is supported by the United States, the European Union, and other countries, who have imposed sanctions on Russia and provided financial and military aid to Ukraine. The Russian government, led by President Vladimir Putin, is seeking to maintain its dominance and influence in the region and to prevent Ukraine from joining the Western Bloc. It is backed by some of its allies, such as China, Iran, and Syria, who have expressed their support for Russia's actions and oppose the Western sanctions. The separatists, who call themselves the Donetsk People's Republic and the Luhansk People's Republic, are fighting for their autonomy or independence from Kyiv and for close integration with Russia. They are armed and founded by Russia and have established their own political and military structures in the territories they control. The international community, represented by the United Nations, the Organization for Security and Cooperation in Europe, and other regional and global organizations, is trying to maintain and facilitate the peaceful resolution of the conflict based on the respect for international law and human rights. It has also provided humanitarian assistance to the affected population and monitored the situation on the ground.
The war in Ukraine is mainly concentrated in the eastern part of the country, where the Donbas region is located. The Donbas covers about 10% of Ukraine's territory and has a population of about 3.5 million people. It is rich in natural resources such as coal, iron, and steel, and has a strong industrial base. It also has a large Russian-speaking minority who make up about 40% of the population. The Donbas borders Russia to the east and the Black Sea to the north. It is divided into two provinces, Donetsk and Luhansk, each with its own capital city. The separatists control most of the territory in both provinces, except for some areas that are still held by the Ukrainian forces. The front line between the two sides is about 500 kilometers long and is marked by trenches, fortifications, and checkpoints. The most active and volatile sectors of the front line are near the cities of Donetsk, Luhansk, Mariupol, and Debaltseve. The map below shows the current situation in the Donbas as of November 2023.
The United Nations have been actively involved in the war in Ukraine since its outbreak, trying to prevent further escalation and promote a peaceful solution. The UN has adopted several resolutions and statements condemning condemning the Russian aggression, calling for the respect of Ukraine's sovereignty and territorial integrity, and urging the implementation of the Minsk agreements, a set of measures agreed by the parties in 2015 to end the conflict. The UN has also appointed a special envoy and a crisis coordinator for Ukraine to facilitate dialogue and coordination among the stakeholders. The UN has also provided humanitarian assistance for the affected population, especially in the areas controlled by the separatists, where access and conditions are more difficult. The United Nations has delivered food, water, health, shelter and protection services to millions of people in need and has appealed for more funding and support from the international community. The United Nations has also monitored and reported to the human rights situation in the conflict zone, documenting violation and abuse by all sides, such as killings, torture, arbitrary detention, enforced disappearances, and sexual violence. The United Nations has called for accountability and justice for the victims and has supported the work of the International Criminal Court, which has opened an investigation into the war crimes and crimes against humanity committed in the war. The United Nations has also deployed a peacekeeping mission in the Donbass known as UNMID to stabilize the situation, protect civilians, and facilitate the implementation of Minsk agreements. The mission consists of about 20,000 military and police personnel, as well as civilian staff from various countries. The mission faces many challenges, such as the lack of cooperation and compliance from the parties, the security threats and attacks from the armed groups, and logistical and operational difficulties in the harsh terrain and weather.
The war in Ukraine is a complex and multifaceted conflict that has been ongoing for several years. The parties involved have divergent and incompatible interests and positions, which makes finding a solution to the conflict difficult. However, there are several possible scenarios that could end the war. One scenario is a military victory, which would entail one side defeating the other by force and imposing its terms and conditions on the loser. This could happen if Russia decides to launch a full-scale invasion of Ukraine, or if Ukraine receives enough military and political support from the West to regain control of the Donbass and Crimea. However, this scenario would entail a high human and material cost, and would likely provoke a strong backlash and resentment from the losing side. Another scenario is a negotiated settlement, which would entail the parties reaching a peaceful and mutually acceptable agreement based on dialogue and compromise. This could happen if the parties resume and intensify the talks in the Normandy format and agree on a comprehensive and durable solution that addresses the core issues of the conflict. This scenario would end the war and create the conditions for lasting peace and stability in the region. A third scenario is a frozen conflict, which would entail the parties agreeing to a ceasefire and a de-escalation of the violence without resolving the underlying issues of the conflict. This scenario would reduce the human and material costs of the conflict and create a more stable and predictable situation in the region. Finally, a post-Putin settlement is another scenario that could end the war. This scenario would entail a change in the leadership and policies of Russia, which could lead to a more conciliatory and cooperative approach towards Ukraine and the West. However, this scenario would require a significant transformation of the Russian political system and society, and would face strong opposition from the conservative and nationalist forces in Russia. Each scenario has its own advantages and disadvantages, and its own likelihood and feasibility. The ultimate solution to the conflict will depend on the parties' willingness and ability to compromise, and on the involvement and support of the international community.